Good morning. My brother and my friend, my colleague, our Cabinet Secretary for ICT, my colleagues in government, PS Kibicho, PS Koimet, our Inspector General, the National Police Service, Mr. Eli Matiang'I, and all of you wonderful people who come from across various institutions in government. I'll be very brief and practical, and I'll go straight to the point. I have this, which is a good speech from PS Kibicho and the wonderful people who work with me, but I'll spare you this speech, which is full of wise sayings from Martin Luther King to Miguna Miguna and all that. And now, I go straight to the issues of the day, and be very, very practical about this. My friends, the last time I checked, I was checking with Joe. The cybercrime industry, the last time I checked, was about $13 billion US industry. And it's probably grown beyond that. Nations around the world are pouring resources into research, because the truth of the matter is this: whether we like it or we don't, from now until probably we exit this universe, our lives are going to be influenced by 3 Ds: data, devices, and designs. Wherever you go, whatever you do in whatever field you find yourselves, your life is going to be ordered, reordered, organized or reorganized using devices, using data, or using designs that people come up with. That then means that it has never been much more important as it is now to think hard about cybersecurity. I mean, because of the respectable code of conduct we have to keep as nations, I can't go into quarrels between US and China right now and how cybersecurity is a critical component of those quarrels, or suspicions and tensions between Russia and the US and how cybersecurity is actually at the core of those quarrels and those problems. That's why I'm happy that, my colleagues from the security sector in the broader sense are represented here, and they are clued into this. I'll make very simple 5 points. 1, we have just started with the formation of the NC4. We have not even begun to scratch the surface of what we need to do as a country. Now is the time for all of us, all institutions involved in the NC4 and so on, to begin to think about massive investment in cybersecurity. Massive investment in terms of training of people, getting people to understand the challenges we are dealing with, the complexity of the problems we are dealing with. Forget about somebody from Laikipia claiming that they are my son, or some fellow somewhere, in this world, raining madness about, Diwali holiday. Collapsing a bank, it's real. If we were to share some of the challenges that we have had to deal with in the security sector before, I don't want to share any so that we don't alarm anyone. But colleagues in the room like Joe Musheru and the Director General at the Communications Authority of Kenya know what you wake up every morning. People trying to hack into critical service provision systems to alter information or steal information and so on and so forth. We must invest heavily. That's my point of departure. Now is the time to invest heavily in training people, in preparing ourselves to address the issue of cybersecurity. And as we do, I don't mean taking people to a 1-week course or 2-week courses, or 1-day seminar in Mombasa or 2-day seminar in, fly-by-night things that we sometimes do as we joke along public service provision. This is serious business. This is no child's play. We need to be very serious about this thing. Just imagine how we operate the radar systems for aircrafts. Imagine one day some madman goes into our radar system and reconfigures the movement of 5 of our planes while they are on air. Can you imagine the havoc that will cause the country? Or people find their way into the grid and they disable our movement or supply of electricity across the country for a matter of hours. We will lose a number of patients in hospitals, and all manner of havoc will happen. you know, people need to appreciate the reality of what we are dealing with. That's why I'm saying now is the time to invest heavily in this. We have started. This is the point of departure. Let us think hard and think about what we need to do in this area. Number two, let's deepen knowledge. Because you see, for a country like Kenya, we are so blessed and so privileged. We are not only at the cutting edge of knowledge and the operations of the digital world, but we possess gifts and blessings that others don't. You know, I don't want to say this, but I was so proud. I walked into some country, you know, when I was out there in a critical installation where they are working a digital environment. Out of their 58 employees, 28 of them were young Kenyan kids who shouted, "CS," when I arrived, and so on. I mean, which means we have capacities that we need to now deploy, but we need to deepen knowledge. There are three, when it comes to digital life, there are only three people. You are either a digital native, a digital immigrant, or a digital alien. Many people who run government systems are digital aliens. And I mean, and you understand what I mean. They're digital aliens. They do not know anything about you know, digital life. They will not make, you know, head or tail of what you're telling them. They are terrified of, you know, the digital world and operating in that world. And then they make mistakes in the process, which endanger everyone else's life. Then there are digital immigrants, people in my generation who came into this world recently. We don't understand everything, but we have the curiosity to try to understand. Then there are the digital natives, our children who have grown up in this environment. You are one of the three. You're either a digital alien, a digital native, or a digital immigrant. I would suggest that as much as possible, when it comes to digital transaction and our cyber life, let's try to have as many digital natives as possible. Bring them on board and give them the opportunity because we have them. That is one of the advantages we have that other environments do not have. And I think we should try to invest heavily in raising these people. I mean, look, we have to be proud of this as a country. We have about 5 or 6 schools that are teaching ICT at degree level and even at postgraduate level. Now is the time to challenge these universities to move beyond offering programs and so on, to invest heavily in critical research in cybersecurity and warfare. Because the war next time is going to be fought in the cyberspace, period. That is it. Brigadier Anderito here can tell you, these wonderful people, the war next time is going to be fought in the cyberspace. That's where we need to be very careful about and make sure that we deepen knowledge. So the NC4, as you work on this ecosystem where we are at, I like the idea that PS Kibijo says, let us bring people on board. Let us include others. Because the more we expand knowledge, deepen involvement, and bring people on board, the more likely it is that we will deepen knowledge, deepen understanding, and be able to do the right thing as we go forward. Let us build institutional capacities. That's my point number 3. And I'll spend a few minutes on this. I mean no malice. I am trying to be as honest and as plain as a public servant can ever be. Please, NC4, have a meeting with our colleagues at the Judiciary Training Institute, JTI, and persuade them to factor in something called digital jurisprudence as part of the development of the capacities of the judiciary. I mean, no one knows the troubles I have seen, I can sing this again, than myself. Digital migration, we had to go to the Supreme Court. And to be honest with you, when I looked at the judgment of the lower courts, sometimes you don't know whether to laugh or cry. You can see clearly the judges cannot tell the difference between broadband, the spectrum. You can see clearly where the challenges are, even in the judgment as you read it. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that we need to invest in this knowledge. No one is born with knowledge of things. We learn. I mean, we are humble enough to say we don't understand this. We ask the digital natives, for example, to educate us and prepare us on what we need to do. Now, my friends, look, from Manhattan to the stock exchange in Singapore, to Nairobi Stock Exchange, to Johannesburg, all transactions are moving to that environment. we have Bitcoin, we have all this. And our conflicts, therefore, are going to move to the digital environment. Who resolves our conflicts? The judiciary. Then they must also be there to be able to resolve the conflicts for us. Because if they are not there, how will they resolve the conflicts we have if they don't have that capacity? I suggest, and I want to ask colleagues like CA who are here, endowed colleagues who may have resources in the institutions and the others, because this thing is also about resources. Let us see whether, for example, I don't know, I need to read the law again on the USF, the Universal Service Fund, to see whether it's just provision of services or there's a window we can use through USF, for example, to pump resources into JTI and work with the judiciary to deepen and strengthen jurisprudence so that digital transactions, digital engagements, and so on are clear. They too understand the complexities and the challenges we are facing. So that when we are talking about impersonation and when we are talking about, for example, duplication of a document or forgery, when it happens in the cyberspace, you are going before someone who understands the challenge as you are dealing with them. Otherwise, you see, you go there and then you have challenges. They don't understand. Now, Joe and I, and Kibicho and Esther here, we are again before the court on Huduma card. Yet, I don't know whether to scream. I mean, look, who in this world, just tell me, the other day the president of Estonia was around, and you should go to Estonia. I mean, all of you are widely traveled people. Which country do people carry cards in bags and so on to sort out things? Some environments now is actually a barcode you need on the phone, and you'll do all your transactions from the supermarket to the petrol station to everywhere and so on. That's all you need. Now, we are fighting in Kenya about whether or not we should have one single source of truth. The US went to the social security number decades ago. How are we going to catch up? That's why I'm saying, my brothers and sisters, I'm trying to be as plain and as sincere as a public servant can be. Let us focus on capacity building. None of us knows everything. Let's be humble enough to know, to go to new frontiers and carry along everyone, because if we leave others behind, we're not better off. Let us move forward, as it were. And one institution that I think we should bring along with us is the judiciary, because the judiciary is a critical actor in dispute resolution, in our business development, whatever investments we are making, whatever conflicts we are going to have, they are fundamental. So we can't force, if there are any of our endowed colleagues in the institutions we have here, poor resources, volunteer resources, let's build capacity and work with the Judiciary Training Institute, for example, to ensure that we all move forward together. Because you see, if we leave some people behind, we're not going to be fine where we are going. Now, let me tell you, from a political point of view, my point number 4 is the danger we face as a society. And the complexities of cybercrime begin from the very basic and primitive ones of someone forging a document and declaring tomorrow is Diwali, to the complex ones of, breaking into systems, coded frameworks, and so on and so forth. In Kenya, as we approach the general elections, my colleagues who are here from the security sector can agree with me. The Inspector General is here. Our challenge number 1 is the misuse and abuse of social media. That's what we are going to deal with. I mean, you have seen the madness around. Some governments, because they are not as strong and as democratic as ours, or as confident as ours, because we are a confident government, they resort to shutting down the internet or disabling, the Facebook or something like that. I've said this before, and I will say it again here openly. Kenya is not going to do that. We are not going to do that. We are a democracy that has matured. We are facing an election which is going to demonstrate even our greater, democratic maturity. We are going to be fine. We are not going to resort to those other tactics. That one we left a long time ago. Our reputation, the world over, is that we are a strong democracy. No amount of insults to us, those of us in government, or maligning or attempted intimidation is going to tempt us enough to go that road. But while I say that, and while I make those assurances, it's important for us to understand that a time has now come when we are going to do our work the way P.S. Kibicho said. We have lived with this nonsense for a long time. You know, there are people in this society, you might actually call them, for want of a better phrase, cyber terrorists or social terrorists. Their job is just nothing but chaos. They wake up in the morning, they think about the number of lies they should say about Brigadier Nderito. So they write all manner of things and so on, or they just lie, you know, say things about P.S. Kwemet. And because we're operating in this ubiquitous environment, they believe you can actually get away with it. And indeed, many of them have gotten away with some of those things. The other day we were counting how many times one of those people is out on bond. Over 8 times. Goes there, gets bond, comes out. Goes there, gets bond, comes out. 8 times. One of them is out 8 times. Mr. Kinoti was telling me the DCI, you know what we're going to do with this bastard? Because you see, we will take him there tomorrow, then he'll be out, and so on. Now, we all have to be responsible people. Because, you know, I don't think that laws actually, to be very frank with you, and all of you, fortunately, are professionals, you are exposed to people, very well traveled. I don't think laws, in and of themselves, actually bring about what you might call the moral culture in our society. The moral culture in our society is brought about by people making deliberate choices that we are going to live differently. There's nothing wrong with someone having a different view from mine. That's why we are a democracy. I mean, we are here. Imagine a world where we all think the same. It will be a boring, stupid world. We have to argue. Someone has to have different views. That's why people go to different political parties. We may agree with them. Sometimes we don't agree with them. But that's fine. That's how life is supposed to be. And in that diversity, we find the flavor of life. That is how we end up building the strengths in ourselves. And we end up building a mosaic of, you know, thoughts and views and a stronger community and so on. That is the stuff of democracy. That's who we are. But that's not what you're talking about. But, you know, some of us have gone to bestial levels, you know, animal levels. You wake up in the morning and publish things which hurt others and their lives, and you don't care. So I think we may have to look for a way of dealing with some of those animals, and then look at the law, NC4, and see how do we get now these guys, how do we deal with some of these people in a manner that will enable them achieve an opportunity of being trained or being helped within the prison walls to learn how to live with others. Finally, it's my very sincere call to all of us to build a universe of responsibility. We are as vulnerable as the next person's care. That's philosophical. In other words, it doesn't matter how much I care if the next person doesn't care. We are as vulnerable as the next person wishes to care. So that whether it's in the banking sector, in the security sector, in the cyber world, we are each other's keeper, in a literal sense. There are some things that you'll pick up in those numbers that Ezra was talking about, and then we're able to use those numbers to build each other's capacities to move forward. I need to point this out to all of you, my friends. When it comes to the cyber world and the dangers we face there is no government and there is no private sector. Because usually we foolishly draw that dichotomy, thinking that, oh, if it is affecting public service, it's okay, those guys don't care and so on. You are as affected by public service in your private sector as anyone else can be. So we don't have a truncated operational environment where effects are going to be truncated so that they come to those who are in the private sector as opposed to those who are in the public sector, and so on and so forth. That's why I'm calling for, consciously, we must build a universe of responsibility where we agree institutionally that as we go forward and as we help one another, we are essentially building, you know, an environment that is helpful to each other. Where we see weaknesses, sometimes you don't have to wait to be called upon to do that. Volunteer your services and your support and go forward and do, you know, what needs to be done. And my friends, we will then build a stronger society, especially we in Kenya. I'm using those words advisedly, especially we, because we are the ones who are a step ahead of our colleagues even in the region in the investments we have done in digital life, and in the level of innovation that we are seeing amongst us, and in the opportunities that we have in our country. And all these can actually be reduced to nothing if we are not mindful of what happens in the cyber world. That's why we must create this universe of responsibility, where we are each other's keeper. We look out for what's happening. We cannot write off the bad behavior and the criminal conduct happening in a political group and say, you know, hiyo ni kazi ya watu wa pande ile. It will soon affect you. We must create a universe of, our responsibility where we work together. You can expect and will get maximum cooperation from us. NC4 will give you everything we can, and we will line up all the institutional structures to support the work you do, especially because of where we are going. And we will act. We are a democratic society, but we will still be very responsible, and we will do our work as expected by the law.